TIAA is on a mission. Why? Because 54% of Black Americans don't have enough savings to retire. So in collaboration with big-name artists like Wyclef Jean, TIAA released Paper Right, new music inspiring a new financial future. With 100% of streaming sales going to a nonprofit that teaches students how to invest. Stream Paper Right now and help close the gap.
This episode is brought to you by Carnegie Mellon's Tepper School of Business. Want to advance your career or switch fields? An MBA from Carnegie Mellon's Tepper School of Business can help. Earn your degree from a top-ranked business school with a thought-provoking curriculum, one-on-one leadership coaching, support from experienced career counselors, and full-time, online hybrid, and accelerated MBA formats. Join the intelligent future. Visit cmu.edu/Tepper to learn more.
Hey guys, Happy New Year. Welcome to this week's podcast. I'm really excited about today's guest, Brandon Kirkpatrick. He's founder and CEO of Catalyst Consulting Group, and we're going to hear all about what his company does. And today's conversation is all going to be about business. It's going to be talking about process improvement and so much more. And I'm happy to welcome Brandon to the show. Welcome, Brandon.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, we connected through Podmatch, and kind of tell the audience your backstory, how you got started, and what Catalyst Consulting Group does.
Right. So I went to school to be an electrical engineer, and so I did that for about 3 years out of college. That was pretty tough, but working with NASA and working with a lot of technology it's not simple. It's very complicated, but it's also very bureaucratic. That was that was kind of my first introduction to lots of red tape. And then really from there got into finance. So how are things funded, things like that, and doing a lot of stocks and bonds, but then working in back end systems to try to tie all that stuff together. And then went into the nonprofit world. So every about 3 years, there's been a pretty big change for me. And so went into nonprofit, really working heavily inside of systems and process improvement. And that's when I got my MBA locally here. And so really going through that process was really interesting. And then started at a startup tech firm where we were doing hardware and software. So I've been around, I've seen really large companies, bureaucratic nightmares. I've seen really small and there's no tape, and that's also a problem. And so really throughout this process is just learning there's a lot of different ways to do basically everything, and how you go from where you are to where you want to be it's a pretty simple process. And so that's kind of my backstory of process improvement and helping in operations.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. Your story actually reminds me of Elon when you're talking.
Oh man, yeah, not quite that level. I'm not quite that level.
No, it's like SpaceX could just outpace NASA.
Just putting your head down and working hard, and that's a lot of process improvement. So what I do now is I'm a business advisor, but I really help companies see where they are, right? Realistically, and it may be a one-person company, it may be a 10 or 20 or 30 or 40. It doesn't really matter the size. Usually the larger the size, the more complex and the harder it is to see reality. But how do we go from this place where we are to where we want to go? There's a lot of people involved, right? And so a lot of the challenges that I've actually seen are they really boil down to communication. I know that sounds crazy, but just about everywhere I go, it's a fundamental miscommunication or misunderstanding. Not everybody's on the same page, right? And so maybe founders or owners know where they want to go, but they haven't communicated it. And so how do we communicate well and really drive people toward this new place? Well, that starts with communication and really over communicating the same thing over and over and over again. And then looking on a smaller scale to figure out like, okay, how do we get there? So if we want to expand by, 20, 30%, how do we get to that? Because maybe our footprint can't expand. So it's creative problem solving and just really good communication.
Yeah. Which I love that. And talking about just like the bureaucratic red tape and just how the government is so inefficient and just f's everything up. So kind of talk about this navigating diverse business environments, and you have a unique background, all the way from NASA to family-owned businesses. And what are key strategies, principles that help you navigate and succeed in such different environments?
I think it's really easy to look around the world, right, and see all these businesses that you would like to emulate, that you would like to become, but that's not you, right? And so you have to be honest with yourself. You've got to be honest about where you are, and maybe your people don't have the skill sets. Maybe you don't have the same customers. Maybe that's a completely different demographic. And so you have to be honest with yourself and base your decisions in reality. But how do you go from, I think business is really simple. It's really, really simple. It's good decision making, right? But that starts with an underlying foundation of here's where we are, here's where we actually want to go. Communicate that. Let's get everybody on board here, right? And then we can drive to that. But if you're rooted in a fantasy world of but we want to be like this company over here, like, I'm sorry, that's just not who you are. And maybe that's who you want to be, but you may have to give and take a little bit. And so it's all about making good decisions and rooting yourself in honest reality.
Yeah. Then I love that. And kind of talk about this. You talk about the chaos loop, and what is the chaos loop? What are the common causes? And provide an example of how you've helped a business identify and break free from the cycle.
Right. So when I started at a tech startup, that was chaos loop 101, right? So every about 3 days, the CEO would go tell the software team what to develop. And so they would have to think about it, right? And then every 3 days, there was another chaos. What do they do? Because if they don't work, now we're wasting money, right? And so this chaos loop that I've kind of coined this term. I don't think anybody else uses it, but it's how do we get out of this doing this thing where we're only putting out fires? And the way you do that is with structure and planning, right? So who comes in to take ownership over that? How do you basically say, we know things are gonna break and we have to deal with them, but how do you remove yourself from that loop? It's really hiring good people, empowering them, right? Empowering good people to take ownership over things and letting them be accountable, right? So not only say, hey, you've got this thing, it's your responsibility now, but hold them accountable to a standard. Well, there has to be a standard first, right? And so when I started in the tech startup land, that's what we were doing. We were just running through this process about every 3 days where we would have to go tell the software team what to do. And that came out of the CEO's brain. And so when I started, we started things like Jira. Jira is a product management, project management type of platform. But that is one system that you would put in place to get out of this loop that's specific to software. And so things like that of understanding what's available, what's out there. Maybe there are systems that are available. Maybe there are people that are available, but how do you get out of this? How do you get out of this? It's putting systems in place and people in place to work that system.
Yeah, I love that. And then the next question is talking about is implementing lean processes. And you've likely encountered many approaches to process improvement. And what makes lean methodology stand out for you? And kind of share a success story from applying lean principles in a business setting.
Yeah, so in my opinion, there's really two big ones. There's Six Sigma and there's lean. And some people kind of lump them together. Six Sigma is all about measuring things and then reducing defects, right? And so lean is more about continuous improvement. I feel like if you have to compare the two, especially in an office type of setting, it's kind of hard to measure defects in an office setting, right? I mean, you can do it, but it becomes tedious. And there's a lot of money that goes into lean, that goes into Six Sigma, whereas continuous improvement can be across the board, right? And so I think that in general, everybody can improve, right? So we can all improve in different aspects of our lives every day. It's easy to digest for any person in a company of, hey, here's what your job is. Let's say you're processing paperwork. That's all you do every day. Well, if you only do 10 a day, can you do 12? What would it take to get there? What would it take to go from 10 to 12? Okay, well, let's identify some of these things and then implement them. And maybe it's a spreadsheet. Maybe it's a different system. So it's this creative problem solving around. And so that's what I like about Lean, is that it's digestible for everybody at every level of an organization, whether you're at the top or the bottom. But it also puts the onus on the person doing the job, right? So you identify as a leader, hey, I'm a CEO, I'm a medical director. How are we going to take this to go from here to there? Anybody can come up with these. Right. It doesn't have to be driven from the top down of say, this is how you're going to do it. But what is done is kind of driven. Why it's important. That needs to be driven from the top down. And so there's this balance and this trade-off that should naturally happen. And so just taking people through this process of critically thinking about how their business functions and then ways to improve. Once it kind of clicks, Lean is not something that you do, right? Six Sigma is something that you do. You go measure, you go reduce defects. Lean is something that you are, right? And so I think it's a state of mind rather than a thing that you do. And I think that changes things because, again, we can always find areas to improve. We can always find, a way to get a little bit better. I don't care what level you are. There's always something you could be doing better. Yeah,
that's so well said. We're kind of coming to the end, but, a lot of my colleagues and friends, we kind of, when we're hanging out, we talk about like, it's hard to hire good people because the good people either they leave and they do their own thing and then the people who are left are they're not quite good for, honestly. So for businesses looking to expand their team to manage growth better, what roles do you think they should prioritize hiring for, and how does the decision change based on industry or business size?
What roles should they prioritize? I think that it depends, right? It depends on the specific business, but I think in general, there are two ways to approach this. You can either hire the thing you need the most, or you can hire the thing that you hate the most. I like hiring things that I hate doing, that I'm terrible at. I would much rather hire an expert to take those things on, because then it's really easy to give them responsibility and ownership over that, and to hold them accountable. Hey, you're the expert. I'm not the expert. Here are the ground rules. Here are the expectations. But how does that change on business sizes? At a really small company, sorry, you may just be doing stuff yourself, right? Like if it's just you. But if we're talking about medium-sized businesses, how do you hire and retain good people? Talk to your people. Ask them what they want. Like, talk to the good people. Don't ask them when they leave. Don't talk to them. They're not going to give you the real answer. When you bring somebody in, those are the people that you need to talk to and say, hey, what's important to you? Like, let's talk about compensation. That's a great example. What do you want to get paid? What do you expect to get paid? Are things, maybe quality of life, work-life balance is more important than, money, because there is a line there and it's different for every person. But what is your community support? It's different for different communities. And so really it's about talking to people and asking them, what do they want? What'll keep you here? Don't wait until they leave to try to give them what they want. Try to create that environment, because if you can create a culture and an environment where your really good performers want to stay, guess what? They'll stay. It's not complicated, right? Like, so a lot of these things are pretty trivial, but it's like people don't think of it like this. They want to make it more complicated to solve this crazy problem. It's like, I don't know why people won't stay. Well, like, have you asked them what they want? Well, no. Well, then, like, how are you going to give somebody what they want if you don't know? So, things like that are really, really simple. And I think it goes a long way.
Yeah. How can people, one final question is just for my own personal interest is like you're a real estate investor, and how has this influenced your approach to business consulting, and any parallels between real estate investing and building efficient business systems?
Oh, that's a great question. We own, a rental house that we bought. My wife and I, we bought it, and then we moved to be closer to family, and we kept it. But what do you do with that, right? So things break, right? This is true for any business. Things break, and who fixes it? How do you get new renters? Those concepts are identical to business, right? So if you want to be the person that does all the things, then great. Go do all the things. Go fix the water heater when it breaks in the middle of the night, or, you have a leak in the middle of the yard that's flowing thousands of gallons down the street, right? Like, we've been there. We've had those plumbing problems. What I do is, and what I did was, I went out and I found a great company to manage it for me, and I hold them accountable, right? So they're responsible for putting somebody in it, and I get to step back, and I get a couple of phone calls a year, right? So it's January 23rd. I got to pay my taxes, and so I will do that, right? But it's not every day. So I think it depends on the owner or the founder, how involved do they want to be, the things they want to be involved in, and then hire out the things that they don't want to be. So I want to own and I want to collect that check. I'm willing to trade that off a little bit so I don't have to get those phone calls in the middle of the night, or there's no renters and now I've got to find somebody to put in it, or I've got to collect money and I've got to have those systems there. So there are things that I don't want to do, and I'm willing to pay, right, for somebody to take those over. So all of those correlate directly into business, right? And everybody's different. So you may want to be a different owner than somebody else. And so making that decision, it's all personal.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, real estate, they say that there's a saying, it's a slow moving asset class. It's a sure thing, but it's really slow. I mean, it's big, bulky, slow, and then that's where you store long-term wealth, and you can cash flow, taxes, depreciation. People that are trying to get rich quick, aren't going to do well in real estate. And all of my business skills I've learned by being an investor, because you see all the shit that happens. I've seen everything.
Right. So. I mean, like, you think when you own a house, it's the most complicated. But when you're responsible for somebody else's house, it is even more so, right? Because now my wife and I may be willing to live in X, right? We may be willing to deal with something, but that other person's paying you money every month, right? Yeah. And so they expect a level of living. And guess what happens if you get a bad reputation?
Yeah.
You think anybody's going to want to move in unless they're like the lowest paying type of people, and they're going to tear the house up? That happens, but I think it's all about being honest with yourself, realizing here's what I'm willing to trade off, here's what I want in return, and how do you find that balance with the circumstances? Yeah.
How can people contact you and check out your work and so forth?
So I'm on LinkedIn. You can search Brandon Kirkpatrick. I'm the guy with the big beard. I think I've got a blue shirt on my LinkedIn profile. I'm also online at catalystconsultant.group. So you can go there and book an appointment if you just want to talk. I'm happy to hang out or inspect, a business proposal, real estate. I do a lot of things, right? And so that's how you can find me, catalystconsultant.group.
Yeah. And let's thank Brandon for coming on. A wonderful conversation, and be sure to check out his socials, give him a like and follow, and check out his business website. And with that, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.